Hey there, everybody. How's it going? Hey there, everybody. How's it going? So this is the second footnote. This one is about otaku rhetoric. I think one of the things that's really important to understand, or at least one of the things to consider, is that like otaku rhetoric oftentimes is used by like people, quote unquote, within the otaku community, but they are oftentimes it's sometimes it's not sometimes it's very often a defensive rhetoric. And what I mean by that is that um what happens is there will be an event that will happen, and then there will be an event that will happen, and like otaku will come out of the woodworks and be all like, well, hold on, wait a minute, we're not actually like this. And then what they will do is one of two things. They will start like parceling up their groups. They'll say like, we're like cool, like normal otaku, but like these guys, they're like gross otaku. Um or they will be all like, okay, some of these things you might see in otaku communities, but we're not all like that, etc., etc. There is a sort of like self internalization that kind of happens, and then that sort of ends up leading to a sort of um, that sort of ends up leading into a bifurcation in some instances of like how otaku should think of themselves. Like, should they think of themselves as like people who are like more closer to like more like quote unquote like normie like understandings of them, or should they go like really deep into like otakudom? Um, and two examples that often come to mind, right, is like Toshio Okada, the Ota King, who like proposes like a very specific like kind of imagination of like what an otaku is. And so like when he says something like, these later people are like not otaku or whatever, he's meaning it in the context of like these identities have changed or have shifted in so very specific ways. And then the other one that I am reminded of is Toru Honda, who thinks of otaku specifically on the context of like, the two-dimensional complex and all that kind of stuff. And he speaks about it in the sense of like, um, we have to like make this separation, or we have to make the separation in an ideological sense, because like we are not falling into like the sort of love capitalism of Japan, that this sort of, in a way, a biopolitical imagination of you must spend money to pursue a real woman and then create a real family and all that kind of stuff, and all these other things you have to get rid of them, they're toys and so on and so forth. And this idea of like something being on the defensive, I think, is not necessarily unique to otaku, but it is really interesting in the context of the otaku lens. One of the things that's really important, right, is that we've actually kind of had similar media at the same time as Densho Otoko that sort of grapples with kind of similar topics. A lot of people might not remember like 40-year-old version as a particularly sharp piece of nerd criticism, but it does reveal a specific imagination of like what a nerd is, because the whole plot is like Steve Carell, Steve Carell's character. He is he's a loser, he's a virgin, and he doesn't get women and so on and so forth. And then he meets this girl, he meets this woman, and then they fall in love and all that kind of stuff. It becomes a romantic comedy, but then there ends up being a point where like he wants to open up a store, I believe. He wants to open up his own shop, and he needs the money, so he starts to sell his figurines. So the implication here, right, is that he's in a state of like arrested development. And so it's thanks to this woman, this real woman, to sort of like break him out of it. It's not thanks to his friends, or it's not thanks to coworkers, anything like that. It's this woman, this real woman who he happens to be in a romantic relationship with. She's the one who gives him the advice that he then follows. And there ends up being a little bit of a conflict where he says like, he doesn't want to do it. He doesn't want to sell those things. But for the most part, I don't remember exactly how it ends. I don't remember if he gets his toys. Sorry, not toys. I don't remember if he gets his like figurines and all that kind of stuff. Like, I don't know if he gets them all back. I don't remember. Or I don't know if he just loses them anyways. But like, it's sold for a lot of the film as something that like you kind of just have to do, because there aren't a lot of other people that he sort of like meets in that environment that are kind of like him. And so in this context, it runs in a very similar logic to something like Densho Otoko of like, get rid of your stuff, meet that right woman, it's just a phase. That's oftentimes the implication of it. You like all this stuff, you spend all this money on that, you're all into all these hobbies. Well, it's just a phase. So yeah, the otaku rhetoric, I think, there's a lot more elements to the otaku rhetoric that I wanted to focus on, but I wanted to move away from the anime and manga stuff primarily because, like, otaku are not just defined by just anime and manga. I mean, we have to remember that there are folks like military otaku and train otaku. Like, there are those guys, right? And they don't necessarily have to be into anime or manga. But they nevertheless, I think, are united with like anime and manga otaku, simply through the lens of like being people who are very heavily defined by like the sort of outward normie group. And then there's like a lot of discussion about like their passions, being really into stuff, all that kind of stuff. But for the most part, I think that's different. I think that is very different. I also do want to mention that I use Nakamori Akio because his essay really sort of helped exploded that kind of thing, and then that also exploded even further. That also exploded even further with the Tsutomu Miyazaki murders. But otaku was arguably used even before that, right? So, but I didn't want to get into like a long history of like the word of otaku. There's a lot of other material that's already out there that's really, really good, that really already talks about that kind of history and talks about some of the challenges about it. I mean, like the whole last section of Debating Otaku in Contemporary Japan is about like how do certain groups actually perceive like what the label otaku is and exactly how fraught it is in a lot of situations. So yeah, that is my other rant on otaku rhetoric.